Hey, Norcal Carters. This is Jason. And in the studio, we have Ashley, and we have joining us tonight Joe Janowski from NKA. So it's actually very surprising. Joe and I were laughing a couple of months ago about doing an insurance podcast, and we did that for karting. And even Joe said, "Oh, this will be a snooze fest." And the first 24 hours, it was one of our better videos for traction in the first 24 hours when we were talking about karting insurance. And the biggest takeaway, I asked Joe, how do we keep our racetracks open? And he said, report stupid shit. So that's how we're gonna kick off the show. This is actually our safety series. But remember, if you see something stupid at the track, just report it. You're not tattling on anybody. You're just trying to keep that track open for as long as we can. But that was a previous show. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on YouTube. But tonight we are doing part 2 of the safety series. Part 1, we had Phil Hand on, and we had Mark. I'm sorry, Mark, I forgot your last name. But we were talking about flags and basic track safety from a flagman or a race director standpoint. So tonight we're going to jump into safety with Janowski with NKA. We're also going to go over some karting tech tips. Sorry, my mind is 1,000 miles a second right now, so I'm trying to slow it down. But tequila doesn't work good for that because then I just slur my words. So that doesn't work. So that's going to be our show tonight. Give me one moment here while I toggle over. But again, we had Phil Hand on last month. We were doing this part 1 of the safety series with flags. And Phil jumped into the flags. We had all the flags displayed. We had them side by side as Phil was explaining what each flag means. It's actually kind of amazing how many veteran karters don't even know. So part of Norcal Karters, we are working on getting new people in the sport. We are also working on educating our existing customer base. And it's, little shows like this that are going to make that happen. So without anything else, if Ashley's ready, give me a thumbs up. And Ashley's ready. She's going to take over the screen. And then we'll introduce Joe in about 2 minutes.
Hey, NorCal. What's up? It's the Norcal Carters chick. All right. It's August 12th. We're already halfway through August. Wow, how did that happen? It's already here. We're excited because lots of stuff's been happening in NorCal. IKF Grand Nationals just wrapped up. So again, we had about a handful of NorCal drivers go and represent us, and a lot of them did well. So we do have the Kid Kart champion from CCKRA, so we're excited. I am excited, but all of Norcal is excited for that. So congratulations everybody that went to the IKF Grand Nationals. That was awesome to see and cheer everybody on Kart Chaser as well. So that was fun. Xander was on last week for our Race for Colby episode of NorCal Mondays. We talked about the Colby Duvato Memorial Race as well as the mental health resources that we're bringing to the race. We talked a little bit about the Colby Duvato Memorial Project, where we are fundraising and we are going to get signs with resources out to every track. We're hoping on the West Coast, but eventually we want to expand. And so that way we can have resources at every track. And so no one can say they didn't know where to turn because Colby's going to be with us everywhere we go. Again, that race is happening this weekend in Santa Maria. All the info is on cckra.com. Also happening this weekend is Prairie City. So Prairie City Race 3 is happening Friday and Saturday. So yes, same weekends, I understand, but the show must go on in every area. So again, lots of stuff happening this weekend. Then we got, I believe, I want to say Blue Max and Reno next weekend. That doesn't sound right. It could be Blue Max and Kinsman. I'll get that cleared up for you and put it in the comments. But we do have other races coming up in NorCal. Like Jason was saying, as a reminder to everyone, yes, please, 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 please just follow the safety rules outlined by our insurance at every, not just where you race. Where's my fingers? Not just where you race, but every track as well. So NKA actually insures most of the Northern California tracks. So this is going to be a general blanket of knowledge for a lot of us, but we're just trying to make sure everybody understands that there are rules and safety procedures that we have to follow. People like me aren't just coming into the event and making up rules as they go. So without further ado, yes, we are going to bring in Joe Janowski. And my first question for Joe is, Joe, what is the importance of safety in go-karting?
Hey, I'm back. Yeah, I'm really surprised by the way that Jason said like that other episode was widely viewed, and I'm still pretty sure if I watched it, it'd probably be a snooze fest. But okay, so you can't lead off with a question like that, right? Okay. So like that's like the big question. So we got to break that one down in a lot of different chunks, right? So like safety is paramount in any sport. And even in sports that aren't racing, you know, if anybody pays attention to football, let's say, you know, the safety, I can tell you, like, you know, I played football when I was in high school back 1,000 years ago. And what we wore back then even is not even comparable to the things that they're doing with, you know, the helmets in football today. You know, what we have in terms of safety gear that we wear today in karting is unparalleled compared to what was probably even 10 or 15 years ago. The karts are a lot safer. The driving is crappier, I think, because of it to a certain extent, but the karts are certainly safer in a general sense. But, you know, everything, track safety, all of those things combine to create a safe events and what that does. And I don't want this to become a huge like insurance discussion again. But, you know, all of those things make our sport appealing to people, right? So we want people that come into the sport, we want them to feel as though as a sport, we're doing everything that we can to make karting as safe as we can. You can't remove risk, but we can certainly do everything we can. So, you know, imagine like mom and dad and son and daughter show up and they're like, wow, we heard about, you know, this race this weekend, and carts are flipping off everywhere, and, you know, people are walking around with, you know, bandages all over the place, and ambulance runs. Again, then we don't get new people in the sport when we do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it comes from every facet, right? And it's important because from an insurance standpoint too, you know, the more accidents you have, the more dangerous things are, then the greater chance that we're all, you know, getting sued by the local personal injury attorneys or whatnot nowadays. So yeah, so that's like a really big question that you're asking.
All right. Well, the reason that I bring it up is because we have had parents actually say this topic is very important to me because my kid is out there.
Sure.
So parents, I say they, but the parents are expecting us as not only track administrators and track, you know, the people who are putting on the race and the people who insure the race. All these parents want to know that that is a priority in our like job per se. So
right.
We do take it very serious. Some of us take it more serious than others, but I mean, there there has to be, like Joe's saying, yes, this is a broad question, but there has to be a level of where to start. So that's what the purpose of this show is about a little bit. And I don't know what Jason's trying to show us here, but
yeah, he's like, all of a sudden I'm seeing the Stars supplement. You might want to pull up the NKA rulebook, Jason. It's probably
yeah,
more applicable. That's just a supplement. So basically, NK is the sanctioning organization for like a lot of tracks, but also technically for Stars. And so we do like a lot of places will do, and it's kind of a stress test. So I'm always with Stars, we're always acting as if we are just somebody who's running NK rules. It's really hard to write rules that cover every aspect across all possibilities across the United States. So, we try to use that, and then we kind of use our own supplement to clarify certain things, or if we have an adjustment that we do, let's say it's a little bit different. But yeah, the NK book's probably going to be best. I'll tell you where to start. This is really simple. You start with yourself. So when it comes to safety, they're really, first off, now I know you guys have already talked about it, but good personal protection equipment, right? So that's where you start. And there used to be a saying, if you have a $10 head, put it into a $10 helmet. And I never really thought that I had a really super expensive head. So like, I really probably didn't have the greatest helmets ever, but really take care of your equipment. That is the barrier between you and whatever you're going to hit, right? I think, those of us been racing long enough, I took some spills, myself. I actually made ESPN Sports Center highlights with one of my flips one time. So, yeah, it's not something to be super proud of, by the way. But I've been there. I've rolled along the ground and bouncing around and hitting the wall and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So you really start there, because that's up to you. You can control that. So you can control the fit of the helmet. You can control the fit of all your things. You can make sure that you're wearing the right equipment, abrasion resistant stuff. So maybe not jeans and a t-shirt, right? Let's get the right stuff on. But then let's move to the kart. And, all sanctioned organizations for a long time have had some pretty standardized things that you need to do when it comes to safety on the kart. And, I've probably been, over my years, Jason, I'm sure is going to agree with this, and probably everybody out there, the 3 people that are watching this are going to agree. We would all go historically through like a safety tech line, and you'd stand there, and it was early, you'd have coffee, you're not quite awake yet, and then there's like 4 old guys and they're looking over your go-kart. And inevitably, we're all like forgetting that we had to do stuff last second. We're trying to rush through pre-tech, and you're just kind of slinging some stuff on there and trying to get through tech. And then the minute you leave tech and you go back and you do something to your kart, then bam, all the safety stuff is gone. So that's the first step that we have to do as a sport, is go, well, wait a minute. That's really not a smart thing to do. And whether you agree with whether a nut or a bolt or something can come loose or fall off, that's up to you. But you have an obligation to everybody else that you're racing against. And that is that my stuff's not going to come off my kart. And so taking the time all through an event, when you remove a cotter pin, put one back in. If you remove the wire, put it back on. Just go out and do the things, because it's always better to take a little bit of extra time and make sure that those things are correct, as opposed to, the other option, which is, oh, I thought I tightened the wheel. Tighten your wheels. Hey, I'll tell you a story about, I don't know, Memo Gidley's pretty well known in your area still, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was Super Nats in like 98 or 99 or 2000, something like that. And somebody had I don't know what it was. I think somebody had a loose wheel when they were coming in. And I remember my dad or somebody walked up and made some big announcement before one of the mains or something. And they're like, hey, guys, make sure your wheels are tight before you go out, right? There was 40 of us on the grid. One guy ran back to his tent, got his stuff, came back up and checked all 4 corners, right? That was Memo Gidley. Now, that was probably less about safety and more about making sure his crap didn't fall off, because he was probably going to win it, right? Or come close to it. But that's an example of taking ownership of your own safety and taking care of the people that are with you. And in the last couple of years, like, weights have been a huge issue. To remind everybody, for those of you that don't know, gosh, it's coming on about 2 years now. There was a weight that came off a cart, and now I've seen and heard stories about weights coming off carts for years. I've probably driven over one or 7 myself, and this particular one happened to get hit by a cart and was ejected like a cannonball into a kid's head, and with so much force it kept going and kind of went and hit trailers and did some other stuff. And that was one of those moments you really sit down and think like, oh crap, as a sport it happened. It was kind of like, for me on my side of the sport, it was kind of like, when Dale Earnhardt was killed, and everybody's like, oh, we have a bigger problem than we thought. And so, because when a weight would come off of a go-kart, it was always this local story, even if people knew about it, right? So I didn't really think this was happening to the extent that it was. And so we came out with that rule and said, hey, we got to double nut these things and wire them and do this and paint them and put your numbers on them, which, by the way, is for the most part the rules we've kind of always had, minus a bigger washer and doing some extra stuff. But really coming down and saying, like, these are the rules we're going to do. And people have done varying levels of this, but, I've found, it sounds a little draconian, but I found that, hey, if the weight comes off, you're going home. I've only had to do that once. And I'm involved obviously with Stars, but I'm also involved in a place called Whiteland Raceway Park. And so it's a local track like a lot of you guys there. And so, we had one happen to us there earlier this year, but you got to make that important to you. When you're putting that weight on, make it important to you that it doesn't come off, right? Because that thing can do some damage. And so seeing great results from that, right? Really pushing hard on that, and people are really doing it. I showed up at just another rando local race recently, and all the weights were painted white. Everything was done right. You're like, man, we really can affect some change and make these things a little bit safer. And then I don't know if you guys want to get into it, how much time you have, but then it's on track behavior.
I have 4 hours.
I do not, bro.
It's 4 hours,
it's like it's 10:50 at night, so I'm like, I'm in that, like, I should be going to bed right now, but I'm not. So, but really, it's safety. Then on track, the things that you can control. And so, I think I mentioned it, like, the all the body work we have now has made karts a lot safer in a general sense. So you don't get people ramping up over everybody, like we did a number of years ago. Generally speaking, it's a lot better. But what it's really done is create a lot of secondary incidents. And so what you end up with is, oh yeah, you pulled out a pre-tech form, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For one of the series, yes.
Yeah. So that's probably the most common thing, and really what these do, and which is really good. And I hope people take a minute and really kind of digest what they're doing. What they're doing is they're saying, yeah, I'm going to take care of my stuff all day. And that's really important. So that's personal safety. And I guess on track too, it's keeping your eyes up, right? It's not making low percentage moves. Don't hit the guy in front of you or girl, right? Some real basic stuff, but sometimes when it gets too easy, when people can do this kind of stuff, the next thing you got people flying off and hitting barriers, and so if you want to talk about safety, it's how do you treat others, and so treating each other a little bit better on the racetrack is a big part of safety as well. And then obviously tracks operating in a safe manner and doing those kinds of things too. So like you guys were talking about flags. I'm still surprised at how many people, even at national races, that aren't sure what a particular flag is. And so, and I think I look back at myself and go like, maybe we really ought to be doing a better job sometimes because you get like lost in the minutia sometimes of like all the things that are going on and producing a race, whether it's like a big race or a local race. And it seems like it's almost the same amount of work. But
yeah,
maybe we should take a step back and go like, oh, wait a minute. We really probably should, take a little bit more time, especially with things like Discord. I think it's a lot easier for us to do now where we can, take pictures. Here, this is a green flag and this is a checkered flag. And here's all the other flags you need to know. So, yeah. So that would be, if I was going to all encompass it, that's kind of where I would say, safety really starts and ends with you. and it's your own accountability to that. Being accountable to yourself for your own safety and being accountable to others for their safety and taking it seriously.
Yeah, and that you have bring up a valid point as far as like with the flags. I think a lot of us, Ashley and I talked about this last week. We've been around this for so long, and so have you, Joe, that we kind of forget what we forgot. Like we forget what we had to learn because we've been around it for so long. And where do like just at every single step, where does that accountability go? I mean, we look across the country, and a lot of the clubs are struggling. Well, when I came up through karting, that's where all this was handled, was at that club level.
Yep.
We have a meeting. If you don't know what to, I've not been to an event in years where someone said, if you don't know what the flags mean, stay around after the driver's meeting. It's okay, we're done with the driver's meeting, let's go race. Boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
And we all forget about it because we just assume everybody knows. And where does that responsibility fall?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I don't know that I think the responsibility is the sport in general, probably. I think all events, and I'll be honest with you, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of this at Whiteland, and I just got involved in that this year. For those, it's a club track on the south side of Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's where I started racing a long time ago. So it's been around a long time. It's been around since '58, I think, and continually operating too, by the way. And so, I realized at some point along the way, like some of these kids don't know what the flags mean. Like, how is that? And then you're almost like, crap. Like we haven't actually said, hey, this is what the flags are. And so, I did this project at Whiteland. Part of it just being a passion project, right? And then part of it was really had a lot to do with how can I take a lot of things operationally that we do at Stars and how well does that apply to a local operation? And, I found a vast majority does, but I've also found that, and you're kind of bringing up something I'm almost ashamed to mention, right? But that is that even myself, that's kind of slipped through the cracks. So recently we've actually been talking about, okay, so we need to have an optional driver's meeting of some sort or a new person meeting or just making sure everybody knows that our tech officials are down there if they have any questions about anything safety tech related, right? Yep. Because we're using
Norcal track owners, promoters, get your pens out.
No, because then I'm gonna get hate mail. They're like, Joe, stay the hell off of.
No, because
go ahead, Ashley.
This has been something that we've all been bringing up together, and I'm very connected with all the tracks, and we talk very frequently. But we've even implemented, and I'm bringing up my club because this is just what I'm doing, but we started a whole kart school thing for like the junior pilots and stuff like that. And we have these kids out there and we're like, oh my goodness, like we need to start from one. Okay. And so that was kind of mine and Josh's wake up call. Like some people may not understand all of this. And so again, we're trying to build that throughout NorCal, and what Joe's saying about the flags as well is that is something that's important that needs to be gone over. Race directors.
Well, I know from an NK perspective, and actually I think you were on it, I believe, but I did kind of a first run of sort of a for lack of a better term, like a webinar earlier this year. And I think I may change that up, and we're going to begin doing some more of those as we go through. And the other second part of that is we want to basically kind of create a library of things that people can use, right? So you can put this on your website. Here it is. Stars National Head Flagman Justin Dittrich is going to go through all of the flags that you would likely see at a normal and typical event, including even the digital flags, because we have some digital stuff that we use at Stars, and we have flags on there that we don't use because nobody probably really knows what they mean. So, so those are a couple of things that I'm going to try to do, because, and here's the other thing too. And, before you guys go up and blow up your local tracks, the reality of it is everybody's busy, right? And it's really the work that goes, I've been shocked at the volume of work on a day-to-day, never-ending basis. So with stars, when you do like a big event, it's this sort of very intense, probably 2 weeks, and the lead up to the chaos during, and then the decompression from, and then things are kind of quiet for a while, and then you do it again, and then it goes away. With local events, what's probably been one of the hardest things for me to get used to is just the day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. Like what track configuration, what this, what that, how are we doing this? What's going on with these people over here? We're getting stuff. So it's this never ending thing of things constantly hitting you. So I think every now and again, things just kind of slip through the cracks. And so I think, it's, and I don't think anybody's going to be, like, well, hey, everybody should just naturally know flags. I think generally speaking, everybody knows what the green and the checkered mean. They have a pretty good idea what a white flag means. It's when you get into yellows and when they should do or shouldn't do something, or when you get into like the move over flags are probably, and how to get past by the leaders, is probably something that creates a lot of confusion. Full course yellows, I don't think anybody would know what that is. Mechanical, the mechanical black, a rolled black flag. I can't tell you how many times, even nationally, I would have a rolled black given to somebody. Here comes an 8-year-old kid coming into the grid crying, right? Because he got a black flag, and then the parents are mad, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that was just a warning. That's all that was. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good instruction. And so we actually, as an organization, right, so we're going to do that too. So there'll be some assets that everybody out there can use as well.
Perfect. I'm excited about that. So I did want to ask, let's talk about a little bit about track conditions and the weather. So over here in California, we are hot all the time.
Is it fire season in California? Doesn't California have like 4 seasons, like flood, or is it mud? Mudslides,
flood, famine,
fire. Something like that. Yeah. I'm from Indiana, everybody, so
let's talk about how the different weather conditions affect like safety on the track and stuff like that, from rain to heat to the other day, or a couple months ago, or last month, we were in Reno and there was like lightning and thunder in the area. So, and that sort of sparked up conversation about like what is the rule book or the insurance side of this topic.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, the insurance companies don't really particularly care. They kind of leave that up to idiots like me to try and figure it out. The general rule of thumb that's out there that really kind of applies to a lot of places, not just karting, right, or racing even, but just generally speaking, is 30 minutes with thunder. And so that's kind of what everybody goes by. That was created a long time ago, right, when we didn't really have active radar. Now, like most things, these things have kind of changed our life, right? And so pretty much everybody can kind of have a pretty active idea of what's going on in the immediate area. So when I do discuss this with tracks, let me tell a story that won't be too long, but I still have PTSD from it. And if nobody's ever been to New Jersey, they have a great karting facility there, New Jersey Motorsports Park. Cool track, great facility, super people, but they have some weird rules there. And one of them is that, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but if a lightning strike hits within a 10-mile radius of an amusement area, which a racetrack there is kind of considered like an amusement where people will be, you are immediately suspended until there hasn't been a lightning strike within 10 miles for over 30 minutes. Now this is automated, apparently, right? So every amusement area around the state, if a lightning strikes within 10 miles, everything shuts off. Well, so we were producing a STARS event there a couple of years ago, and it's on the coast, right? So you're not too far away from, the ocean. And there was this little cell, and I swear to God, this cell was out there all weekend long. And it would come in and it would do a lightning strike like 9.7 miles away, and then kind of sit there and do a couple of them, then it would go away. Well, what was happening to us at the track is it's bright and sunny. The next thing you know, this horn comes on, and I'm not even gonna do the horn sound because that freaks me out too. But all weekend long, this horn would come on, and literally, like if there was carts on the racetrack, we had a red. We couldn't even pull the carts in. They would make everybody come off the racetrack back to the pits. And so you just have go-karts sitting out there in the bright sun. So that's an example that I want to bring up of an intelligent use of technology and not an arbitrary use of technology. So the idea of like, okay, I can see lightning and hear thunder, is it coming our way? So again, if you don't have good information, you always go back to the default. If you see lightning, hear thunder, 30 minutes. If you have good apps that you can use and somebody that can look at it and kind of see where things are moving, if it's going to be within 4 to 5 miles of you, you need to lock it down. Because at that point, especially as storms are popping up, you really can't tell exactly where things are going to go. So 10 miles is pretty good. 10 miles means you need to be pretty much looking at what's happening and making a good judgment call. However, if it's 10 miles way over here and it's moving in some other direction, then just being smart about what you're looking at is pretty important there. And when it comes to, heat actually was something that came up recently. And I saw somebody put a comment in there. I didn't have a chance to read it because I was busy flapping my gums, but there we are. 99 in Texas. Well, I don't know if that's what your rule is or what it is right at the moment. I'm going to assume it's what it is at the moment. There really aren't any heat related issues or cold related issues when it comes down to running on a kart track, as far as I'm aware. If there were, there's about 10 races I would like to not have rain in my lifetime. Jason, you were in Oklahoma City at the World Finals, and I want to say it was like, I don't know, man, it was 120 degrees, 119% humidity. It was, people were falling out of go-karts.
Honestly, I think it was only 99 degrees. And then people in the Midwest have something called "it feels like."
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is that? It feels like hell. Like,
it feels like you're drowning.
Yeah, it was 100, 105 air temp, and then the humidity was 99%, and it was not raining.
I mean, I've never ran a race like that. And that's when we used to do something like 20 miles or something like that. And so it was like a 40-lap race, and that was probably, I mean, we were using dry ice people to try and keep
people were dropping. Like the engines couldn't even cool. The water-cooled engines couldn't even cool down.
Couldn't even get below 150, 175. Anyway, the point is that no, we don't actually have them. And I think the reason is because it'd be nice, and I think local tracks could probably realistically manage that. I think nationally would be really tough because I could say, because the weather in Indiana is so wildly different than California, right? So I could say, hey, if it's 92 here and the humidity is X%, then you need to shorten races or do something like that. And when you try to get into micromanaged situations like that, it gets really tough. But I can see a local place going, hey, if it's really hot, we're going to park it. Now, what you tend to see, like in Texas, like South Florida, they tend to kind of really slow down. Phoenix, they really kind of slow down the summer, and really like wintertime is kind of their big time, right? So, but yeah, so when it comes to weather and things like that, it's really rain. One question I get too is, and I really don't know a good answer to this, but I'm tracking data as much as I can get. And that is, when should you switch from rain to wet, or from dry to wet tires? And is there a point that you need to pull people off? Well, sometimes it's super obvious, right? So everybody's on dry and they're going around, and then this huge monsoon rolls in and dumps 1.5 inches of water on the track in 30 seconds. Okay, that's pretty obvious, right? You got to call that in. it's the one where it's not really raining, and then it kind of starts raining, and then it stops, and it starts, and it stops, and it's like misting a little bit. You can see some dry lines. That's where it gets super challenging. And a lot of times, my personal preference is to actually kind of leave it up to the drivers. They sort of know the track and know the grip, make better decisions. I made a call at a race one time that nuked an entire field of rain tires. And so I don't know how many thousands of dollars that was in rain tires, but that was kind of what led me to kind of also head that direction, right? So, it's kind of looking at things like that. Don't race in the rain at night unless, there's really no other option. And then ultimately for racers, again, this kind of comes back to managing yourselves. Do what you're comfortable with. If it's too hot out there, don't race. If it's a rain event, you're not comfortable in the rain yet, don't run. Or slow down, to a level that you are comfortable. Nobody's going to force anybody to do something you don't think you should. If people don't like it, tell them to go pound sand, right? And so that's kind of how I look at weather. But did I answer your question too? Like, was there a certain direction you kind of wanted me to go there, Ashley? Or?
No. That's pretty much the answer, because it was like the thunder and then the heat is sort of our biggest top two. But next I did want to go into like emergency procedures, meaning what injuries require immediate attention, what is done, what should be done in case an accident is on the track.
Okay. Most of karting's injuries that you get are going to be what I call outer extremity injuries, right? So a vast majority are wrists, arm, shoulder. That's what you get a lot of. If people are not wearing rib protection or the chest protectors, then you're going to see sternum injuries and things like that. Most of those injuries are not life-threatening injuries. And this, by the way, goes to feet too, right? So what tends to happen in a flip, if that's where the injury is coming from, the first thing that people do when they go over, if you ever slow down video, a lot of times they put their arm out. Because you have this stupid idea that you can catch yourself, right? So they put their arm out, and there's your broken wrist or your broken arm or your clavicle. Your clavicle is actually built to break, and so that's why these break all the time. They're actually meant to do that. So none of those, all of those are scary and they're painful. I've never broken my clavicle, but I've broken other stuff, and so I can understand, especially when kids are involved, right? But 9 times out of 10, that's really not a hospital or not an ambulance ride. So really, it's not calling emergency services out. Every track should have an EMT or someone who is reasonably certified to be able to assess a situation and then make a determination about what needs to happen from there. So most of the time, honestly, most people with most injuries you get in a karting incident are going to easily be able to be driven to an ER room, because it's really probably going to be more comfortable than riding in the back of an ambulance. If you've never ridden in the back of an ambulance, it's not cozy. It's not a great time. So anyway, so you can do that with a lot. When it comes to the second level types of injuries, so suspected head or neck injuries, back injuries, any sort of, if they're unconscious for a short period of time, or the injury seems a lot worse, than what you might normally be looking at. So you got to remember too, there's a lot of variables here at play. Younger kids are going to be a lot more impacted by a crash and an ouch, right, than some older grizzled guys like, Jason or I. So, be careful of the kids that, head injuries are probably the one that I'm most scared of, generally speaking, because there's just been so much information coming out about numerous head injury kind of things and the CTE that happens afterwards. And the nice thing is, karting helmets and racing helmets are really, really good and have been for a long time. But if you see someone that takes a really good hit to the head, if you can inspect the helmet, if the helmet shows signs of a really big impact, park them. They don't. I think the other thing too is like, we get this sort of mental idea, like if you're not feeling really bad right at the moment, let me back in the cart. You still have adrenaline going, and it's okay to tell somebody, hey man, you had a big hit, and and I'm looking at your helmet and I'm seeing something that I don't like too much, and so I'm going to let you take the rest of the day off, and then tomorrow, if you're still feeling pretty good and your eyes are aren't crossed and you're making sense, and you slept well, then we can reevaluate it. But really make sure all of you guys have a good EMT first responder that's on site that can really handle those things. Those are things, especially when you get into a middle area where I'm not capable. I haven't been trained on what to look for. Generally speaking, though, for all you people listening out there, especially if you're a parent, do not run onto the racetrack when your kid just has an incident and attend to your kid. We actually had this at a Stars race recently, and a young guy, and he got injured. He was injured. It was like a weird Tommy tip over thing, but where the steering wheel came down on him, Charlie Myers, where the wheel came down on him, caused some internal injuries and stuff like this. So he's laying there. Well, dad peels off across and gets to him and has no idea what the injuries are. None. Rolls him over and is trying to take his helmet off. It's the worst possible thing you can do. Let the people that know what they're doing get there, assess the injury, right? If you have a kid that's laying on the ground curled up, then we need to know what that is. Can you wiggle your fingers? Can you wiggle your toes? What day is it? Where does it hurt? Tell us where it hurts. And what they're trying to do is to assess, do we have a neck or a spine injury or potential head injury? That's first. Like, you want to get those off to the side and then figure out what the problems are. So, but that's a big one. That's a really big one. Make sure that the EMT or someone who's trained is the first person that's making those initial decisions at the racetrack, and then follow their advice, especially if you're a parent, because you're going to be a little bonkers at that moment, right? Too much or not enough?
Kind of building off of that. There was actually an incident at Newcastle Motorsports, I believe, over the weekend that I wanted to ask about because, first off, I hope everybody's okay. There was a driver that had to receive medical attention, so on the grid. And so my question becomes this: if our EMT is assisting a person on the grid with an injury and or CPR in this case or something like that, is there a red flag on the track?
Should be.
Okay.
Yeah, should be, because an EMT can only be one place at one time. If they have something that you would call critical in nature, and I would think if somebody was giving me CPR, I feel like that's pretty critical. I haven't even heard of this, by the way. So you guys are beating me to the punch somehow, which happens. I don't see everything that comes in all the time, right? And honestly, I've been enthralled with the whole Austin Dillon taking out half the field to win a race, right? So that's what I've been paying attention to. But I'm kidding, by the way. But when you have limited resources, then you have to be able to allocate where those resources go at any particular time. And any time that you're in what I would call a serious situation, then everything should pretty much park until that situation is resolved, because I would expect that there could be transport involved. Once a patient's stabilized and you're waiting on transport and everything is kind of calmed down and clear, yeah, I think you're probably pretty good to go, I think. But right in the middle of an emergency situation, at that point, yeah, everything should be parked, because that EMT is not going to be able to get on the racetrack. They're not going to be able to leave an individual who needs right now immediate care. And so that would be my suggestion. Now, is there a rule on that? Not particularly. And that's sometimes where the EMT might want to be able to make that call too, or they need to communicate with those things beforehand. And actually, that actually leads me to something good too. And sometimes it's always good to sit down. You can never anticipate all of the potential things that happen during a race day. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm still shocked all the time, right? Well, how'd that happen? Or what was this? Or, what happened over here? So you can never do that, but you can sit down with your team. I'm going more on the promoter side now. So if you're an average kart racer, this might get a little boring for a second, but sit down with your team and talk about the basics. At Whiteland, I'm having everybody kind of re-go through, and they're all getting first aid certified, trained on defibrillators, the real basics, to make sure that we always have coverage, all the managers that are there, because there's a rental karting operation that happens there too, right? So you want to make sure that we have the things that we need and the training that we need to handle those things. So every year it's a certification program, all that kind of stuff, make sure everybody's up to snuff, and then sit down and talk about incidents like that. So we have a really bad situation in the pits, and that actually happens. Probably an EMT's at a lot of places is more active in the pits than they are on the racetrack, especially on like really hot days where people are dropping like flies from heat exhaustion. So, which means drink water, people. Put all that Red Bull crap down and actually just water. That's all you need, man. Like maybe a little Gatorade, I'm cool with that, but just water, believe it or not. So yeah, and then, like we talked about in the webinar, having an emergency action plan is also a great idea, because a lot of people don't know who to call. So let's say you have severe, like a lot of people don't know how to call Lifeline. If your EMT doesn't happen to be piped right into the system locally, what do we do, and how do we do that, and where does a helicopter land? Working through those things. What happens if, God forbid, there's a fatality in some way, and how does everybody deal with that, and what do we do? So those are also really good ideas about severe situations that can happen, that as a facility operator or club or whatever, is good to kind of go through and sit through and talk about some of the bad things that might happen, because they can. And so being prepared for those is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, next question then. With a red flag, do all the carts have to be stopped in the same spot? If I'm throwing a red flag and say just the flagman has the red flag, then I have to wait for all the carts to see the red flag with their flagman, right?
Well, yeah, they can't stop until they see it.
Okay.
So I would go back and probably I'd have some other questions. It'd be, how many people are on track? So do we have other corner workers? And then if we only have a couple that are out there, it's always good for at least one of them to have a red flag, one of the more capable ones. Where everything kind of gets a little sideways is who gets to order the red flag. And so a lot of this comes down to, like, when you hand a corner worker and you say, here's your yellow flag and here's your red flag. The yellow flag's pretty obvious. And like when they see something happen, they can go ahead and wave the yellow. Like nobody's going to get hurt from that. But they shouldn't be able to order a red flag. That should come from somebody who's either a head flagman or a race director, although my personal opinion is race directors usually shouldn't be really dealing with everything going on a racetrack, because there's all kinds of other crap going on in a race, but everybody does it their own way. But somebody should order that red flag, and then they're executed, and you can basically be like, okay, you take this pack coming at you and make sure they stop. I'm going to grab this pack coming at me on the front straightaway and get them stopped. If you're able to, sometimes it depends on the track and the location of the incident. So if the field is able to slowly come to you, great. There's another way to do it too. You basically really, in a red, you really just want everybody to get stopped.
Yeah.
As quickly and as safely as you possibly can. And sometimes that's a little bit of a messy endeavor, right? Especially with some younger kids. But generally speaking, because you'll have the one kid, they see the red and they're like, oh, well, I should probably slow down here at some point. And then the other kid is like, full stop, and smoke rolling off the tires, and they create a second red. So really what it boils down to, kind of maybe with the flags, like what to do when you see a red, and that is hand up, get off the gas, start putting on the brake, and come to a safe and complete stop, right? Then everybody can assess where everybody's at after that, which is really probably the smoothest way to do something like that. So we definitely need to cover that in the how to do a red. But sometimes on the national stuff, we would actually, we'd get everybody stopped. But then once we could ascertain like where the incident is, we would actually allow carts to slowly drive back to like the front straightaway or to an area that we would kind of designate that wasn't going to the incident. Everybody would be talked to, and they'd just kind of slowly work their way over. And then you can begin the process of getting everybody lined up again and just kind of seeing where we're at.
All right. My last question on this subject is, what is a corner worker's responsibility if a car is spun out?
I love this one. I'm not sure if this is going to be a popular answer. A corner worker's first, I hope I'm going to have to show this to everybody at Whiteland Raceway Park and with Stars, because I say this all the time. Their first responsibility is their own safety. So this goes to everybody out there that is racing at tracks or is promoting tracks, whatever. A corner worker's number one responsibility is their own personal safety. Never forget that. Okay. They should never, ever put themselves in harm's way just to get you off a berm or to get you restarted. Okay. So it's probably one of my hugest pet peeves is when drivers are willing to bring somebody onto the racetrack in a dangerous situation and try and get them restarted or something simple. Number two, their second job is to assess the situation and warn oncoming drivers. Okay. Their job. So this is really important. Job number one, make sure that they're safe. Number two, assess the situation and make sure that drivers that are coming into that area know that something is happening. Okay. Only when number one and number two have been handled and somebody else is able to communicate with them and say, hey, okay, so you've got a gap. You can get out there and help them if you want to or can. At that point, when it is safe to do so, then they're to move to the incident if it hasn't already cleared up by itself. And most of them do, honestly. Right. So that's what should happen. Okay. Here's what usually happens. A corner worker sees a cart spin out, starts running with the yellow above their head. If even that much, they might be flailing a little bit, and then straight to the incident. And all of a sudden there's a pack of 6 carts coming in. Right. And all of a sudden corner worker looks like, like a deer stuck in the headlights. Sometimes they get hit. And that's a bad situation. So corner worker, personal safety first. Second, warn oncoming drivers that there's something going on in a corner and they need to be aware of it. Number 3, move to the incident only if it still exists and only when it's safe. And then get back to your position safely. That's the job of a corner worker. Now people are like, what about officiating? And which is probably a podcast for a different day. But because corner workers are not officials. They're out there for safety and management of a course. They're not officials, and their job should not be to be an official. Right? Their job should be to protect themselves, warn people of things that are happening in front of them on the racetrack, and move to it safely if they can. And that's it. So right. I love that question because I say it so many times, and honestly, I'm gonna do a bad plug, Jason, but this is kind of why I began using lights at Stars. It is really hard to stop that behavior, and it's really hard to stop the expectation of that behavior, right? Which is actually probably worse. So a lot of people will basically, they see their kid spin, and if some guy is not beelining it straight to that incident with their flag waving, then all hell's breaking loose. And so we began, and also I began to see really corner workers don't get a whole lot of training. So you really don't want them making those kinds of decisions. I went to lights so that I had better coverage, right? So I usually use like 6 lights around a course, and somebody can be like, here's a warning light, blink, blink, blink. It's always in the same spot. And, in theory, at least they're always supposed to work. We have our blatant plug for, I don't care where you guys get lights. If lights make sense, we do pixel lights. I love them. I use them. They're damn near indestructible. They've been hit a number of times while I was learning how to place them on racetracks in the best spots, but they're not for everybody. They're not for every track. They're not for every club, but in the absence of using, and that's why lights are good, is because they can just cover a much bigger area. So yeah, that gives you a pretty good idea of kind of what we do. So the 4-flag corner light is a really nice piece because it just uses like a little 12-volt battery, and everything is radio frequency, so you don't have to wire anything or anything like that. But anyway, didn't mean for this to be a plug.
Mention Norcal Carters so we get a 10% commission.
See, there you go. All right, yeah, I'll do that. I'll honor that. At any rate, so those are ways that's one of the ways that I use technology to try and make it safer, because in the NK system, it's not every week, but we certainly get a pretty fair amount of, over a year, 2 to 3 to 4 corner workers that have been impacted on the racetrack. A good friend of mine, Scott Clark, who a lot of you would know. If you ever run nationally, you'll know Scott. He works for a lot of the national organizations. We got a little music going there. Just a little video bit. There we go. So a number of years ago, Scott was working a SCUSA race, and he was actually he was working on track, and he went to an incident. He didn't watch for his own personal safety. He didn't warn. He'll tell you this. He didn't warn the people coming first, and he didn't go to the incident when it was safe to do so. And he ended up getting impacted significantly. I believe he went 30 feet in the air, came down. I remember getting the phone call, and people thought, hey, there's no way he's going to make it. And he had, I don't know, if you listen to him, the number always changes. It can go anywhere from like 7 to 492 broken bones.
He was fucked up. I mean,
yeah, he was jacked.
He was fucked up. Like, there's no other way to put it, and people need to be aware of that. Yeah,
and so I have Scott talk to corner workers all the time at STARS events, and I used to have him do it when I was helping out with the SCUSA stuff. And that usually helps things sink in. And so all those kids, and the funny part of it is with corner workers, it's one of the last things sometimes you think about, like, oh, who's working corners this weekend, right? They are in the worst possible spot all day that you can be. They're just meat bags running around on a racetrack with no safety gear whatsoever. And naturally, well, of course, Andy, I'm just going to say 492, and I'm sticking to it. I'm Polish. I can get away with it. So at any rate, it's just, I see Andy totally threw me off my whole train of thought right there. What I was talking about, but which is pretty typical, but really it's really hard to find them. It's actually hard to find anybody to go on a racetrack now, which is the other reason I used lights, because it was just hard to find anybody that knew what they were doing. So that's why I started using lights too, was just to give better representation and not have to worry as much about the local people, and really just use them for safety. And we guide them over the radio. Move, don't move, stop. You've got 15 seconds, get across and get back, stuff like that. Really try and keep them safe, because boy, when they get hit, it's awful. It's just an awful thing, and it doesn't have to happen. So that's my corner worker spiel.
Yes. So, all right. That we answered the corner workers. We answered the red flag situations. We answered emergency procedures. We talked about regular maintenance and the importance of maintaining your cart and a little bit about the tech sheet and things like that. So, Joe, let's talk a little bit about stars, and then as we wrap up. So, yeah, tell us about stars as we close out for the night. Thanks for joining us.
And
And
you like asking me these really open-ended questions.
oh, we'll just give a shout out. Stars, Christian, Nikki, we love y'all.
So I have a great group of people. Obviously, I'm going to give the snapshot here. So a very long time ago, very, very long time ago, my mom and my dad started a thing called Superkarts USA, which turned, the name morphed into SCUSA, which most people know. And over a number of years, we developed that. And just really enjoyed that time period. I was actually very lucky because I got to really do a lot of innovating, I guess, back then. Most kart races actually were really kind of boring, and it was just go-karts going around the racetrack. And what do you think? Like there's no pizzazz to them, right? And so SCUSA kind of gave us this idea or this ability to kind of inject some pizzazz. And they were also like shifters, right? I mean, so like it's like natural pizzazz and then extra pizzazz. So we did a lot of stuff with that and sold it to Tom in 2006, I think. And then I just kind of did racing around here for a long time and got back involved with SCUSA in going into 2017, implementing a lot of these kind of safety things, right? Because I remember walking around the Supernats in 2016 and just looking at go-kart after go-kart after go-kart that's just mutilated, and thinking, man, there's got to be a better way, right? So I'm one of those idiots that I go ahead and just jump in and see what I can do. And so did that for a couple of years. And in the meantime, I really kind of was getting the itch to promote. And being a race director, I wasn't even a race director. I wouldn't allow anybody to call me a race director. It was like director of competition or something like that. And, which was a lot of fun. And I think helped kind of get that program sort of settled down. And, we implemented a lot of cool stuff. And so then in that same time period, again, I was really kind of itching to do something a little bit different on the promoting side. And so I started a series locally, ended up being branded Stars Championship Series because people ask me why I name it Stars. And the reason is not what everybody thinks. There was a series that I fell in love with back in the 80s. And I just thought the name was always just cool as hell. And so that's why I did it. It was a dirt late model series. So I'm kind of a hillbilly too, believe it or not. But started that. I think we had like 40 people or 50 people the first year on average entries, and it's pretty small, and but had a great time. And really our focus my focus has always been, I didn't wear this intentionally, but this is kind of like one of my sayings is I like to do cool shit. And so that's what we do. It's just kind of like, what's cool? Like as a racer, what's cool? As a team owner, what's cool? Can we produce really badass races at a price point that make a little bit more sense? And I have a great team that helps me do it. So Christian Marsh came in early. He's a lot to handle, but he does a great job. And so I've built a lot of how our program works, and Christian adds a lot of, let's say, flavor to that. And Nikki, she's the boss, right? So she's the one that actually probably makes most of it actually function. We've got, there's so many people that are involved in it now. I can't even mention all of them, but it's been such a blast I've been in a unique position that I've actually got to kind of take this ride 2 times in a sport. So I got to enjoy this sort of really creative time period with SCUSA, and now I'm getting to enjoy this really newly creative. Stars is very tech forward because I realize like even in a lot of this can apply to local tracks too. Like, so you don't have to be afraid of tech. Tech should come in and be able to do things easier, right? So like I use lights, we use the Alpha system, which makes life a lot easier on a day-to-day basis in terms of just running all of your stuff. Because so much of it's automated behind the scenes. So once you get things set up, it's like super easy to do things in it. And just so many other things. At any point, you can look at, I'm trying to introduce tech into it in some way, shape, or form. And then probably the final reason, maybe the most important reason, was I really want to see, I really wanted to develop best practices that I could then begin to bring back to the rest of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people keep all these things, or there's really no incentive, right? If you're doing certain things, how do you relay that back? And there's actually, I'm probably one of the few people who could actually realistically do that and get a lot of that information back. And so over the years, we've been starting that process of going, well, what works? And that has a lot to do with, I think, talking about Whiteland. There was a major reason why I got involved in Whiteland too, was because I really wanted to see how that translates from national best practices, like things we do just because, it's the best way to do it. Does that apply back? And a good chunk of it does. Some of it doesn't, but a good chunk of it does. And so it's a little bit about stars. And so now it's cool. And we got Night Fight.
Yeah. And one thing about this crew too, Joe and Nikki and Christian, they'll answer your questions. Like, legit, you don't have to be scared to talk to them. I emailed Nikki sometimes once a week, sometimes more than that. And they really do answer questions. So we do have a question here. Was there another guy involved with Don way back before Jim Marley?
Okay, to clarify, Don is my dad. And my dad passed away in 2016. And then Jim, I think, passed away in 2018, 2019. I can't remember. There wasn't, actually. It was my dad and my mom and me. And that was pretty much it. So I did a lot of the work on SCUSA like during the week. And then, when we had a race, my dad would walk around and act important, and my mom would do all the work. So she used to score 30 125s by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know a lot of you just can't fathom what that must be like, but that's how they used to do it. She used to do it by hand, 30 of us. It was crazy. Crazy. Talented woman, that woman.
Yes.
I thought Andy was using that as his foot in the door to get his name dropped in there again.
Was it Andy? I don't know. No. Yeah, so actually that's pretty good, Andy. You're stretching pretty far back. I think most people in the sport, it's kind of funny how sports have kind of a limited memory, and so even today, probably a lot of people would be like, who the hell's Jim Murley? You know, and there was a SCUSA before Tom, right? And it's like, yeah, believe it or not, it's had a pretty long and pretty wild history, man.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe, for hanging out again. We put some links in the comments, track light systems. We put the pre-check video. We put the safety series with the flags episode in the comments. So if you want to take a look at any of the stuff that we talked about earlier, it is in the comments to look. And now we got more comments. Thanks. Thanks, Andy. Andy's like a fact checker anyway. So sometimes when I need an answer, I'm just like, Andy, what year was this?
I thought he was like our karting version of Rain Man.
Yeah, definitely super nuts. Yeah, definitely. It just means we're old, dude. You are not kidding me. So my wife keeps basically I'm like 12 years old. I just get to play in racing all the time. My body keeps getting older, but I'm still an idiot. So just really enjoy what I do.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Joe. And
no problem.
If anybody has any other questions, Joe will be with us next month again to sort of go over any questions that we got this time, and apparently to talk about current events, because we did tell them some news on here tonight. But yeah, so reach out to Norcal Carters if you have any questions about NKA, or if you need to get a hold of Joe or Nikki or any of the crew. So thanks, Joe, for joining us. If you want to close us out, Jason will wrap us up.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Joe. I know it's late for you.
It's all right, man. You know.
Hopefully we sell a couple of light systems.
Hey, I hear there's a commission involved in that. So yeah.
Perfect.
All
And then we
right.
get some, race entry giveaways.
That'd be cool.
Yep.
Hey, some of you guys
go.
from the West Coast need to come out and run Night Fight. I think it's going to be pretty wild. It's in Trackhouse. What is it? Trackhouse Kartplex in early September. It's going to be a pretty neat show.
What's it called? Knife fight?
Yeah, we call it Night Fight.
Tell us about it.
It's the last race on the Stars Championship Series calendar.
Okay.
It's a night race. Hey, if you can't make it, it's going to be live on Xander's program, Kart Chaser. But we name all of our events. So like whenever you go to a Stars race, like at Newcastle, it's King of the Castle, right? The first race we did was at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Super cool track, by the way. Great people there too, like to work with. But that one was called Queen's Gambit because it's like the Queen City. We've done the Steel City Showdown. To the 206, have to run Trackhouse rules. Well, we don't do 206 anymore with Stars. We used to. I believe if anybody does run a 206 there, I think, there's a special muffler or something like that. Outside of that, it's so we name them. So like Night Fight, it's personally I always wanted to do a big race that was just built to be at night. And so that's what it is. So kind of the name just kind of came out from that, Night Fight.
Cool.
It's a neat show.
Very cool.
It'll be prime time for you guys. So tune in.
That would be.
All right, guys. Well, Andy commented again. That's what threw me off.
That's funny. I like that. Actually, I might start doing that, Andy. That's not a bad idea. Yeah. I'm going to steal that idea from you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. If there are any more questions, go ahead and put them in the comments or put them in our messages. So that way we can write the next episode with Joe. Again, we have 2 races this weekend. We have Prairie City and we have CC Carey in Santa Maria for the Colby Dubato Memorial Race. All info you can find on Norcal Carters. So everybody have a good week and we'll see you at the track.
All right. Remember, if we all get one person in karting, we'll double by next year.
It's the baseball rule.